Yeah, it's now live. Okay, got it.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Let me know when you can see me.
Yeah, it's on there.
Good. I just need to press record, I think. Here we go. There we go. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Rosy Glow here with the lovely Gemma. We've got some very exciting conversation to have today. And we are really looking at divine human leadership, what this actually means, and how this relates to the future. I just need to sort my hair out a little bit. So, what is this divine human leadership, Gemma? We've talked about divine feminine, divine masculine. I'm happy to touch base with that as well in a bit more detail today for those who are interested. But in terms of this star peace, co-creating the new earth narrative, we're very well aware that many of us are not very happy with the political leaders, the people that are the decision makers on this planet at this stage. And, you know, we have some incredibly wealthy beings, and money does play a part, which we really need to talk about today. So remind me, Gemma, who are really quite traumatized, is all I can say, from a birth perspective and a pregnancy perspective, which is where I'm an expert, amongst many other areas. And yeah, essentially it's shifting the balance and saying, okay, who could we trust? What qualities do we need in a leader in order for us to feel like we can elect them, trust them, align with them? Bearing in mind that I want to distinguish between starseeds and divine human leaders, being that they're both starseeds, but there are many, many humans on this planet, humans, light beings, that have come, and they don't have lofty, big, take over the world goals, right? They're conscious, they're heart-centered, they are really interested in like deepening their connection to their soul and spirituality, but they're not here as the sort of the corporate takeover, as in taking over the corporations and the governments, right? They're here effectively to activate their light bodies, so their starseed consciousness, to anchor it and to amplify it. That's the energy that then allows, if you like, the crowd that follows to follow in the direction of the light and the love, right? And the divine human leaders are those who are the awakening starseeds that are willing to operate within the parameters of truly surrendering control to their soul, understanding the relationship between their human self and their soul self, and are willing to really embrace the journey, which is the road less traveled, of integrating shadow and light, shadow and light, shadow and light all of the time, so that they are truly walking the path of heart-led, which is soul-led leadership, aware that no one's perfect. We're all ascended masters in training. Okay, this is the point. We're all ascended masters in training if we're on this path. And you have to have been a sinner to have been a saint. So a lot of these leaders of the future might have quite shady pasts, which is interesting, right? Especially when the media gets hold of things. And when I say shady, I mean they've experimented, they've lived, maybe they've had an affair, maybe they've done drugs, you know, maybe they've been out of alignment in the past. But it's this journey of transparency that's one of the 6 pillars of divine human leadership that I really, really wanted to get excited about today. But over to you and your reflection before I run away with it. And I just need to turn, one sec, because my PC needs turning on, baby. All right.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting. You just touched into an area that was one of my questions, which is how will these divine leaders, divine human leaders emerge? How do you see that happening? Like, what process needs to happen for divine leaders to emerge?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I would say, first of all, they need to have had an awakening of some sort, right? There's something that's happened, whether they were born knowing that, you know, they were a star seed, or whether they were born feeling very different to their families. Like, they've been on the journey. They've been on the journey of having hit rock bottom on some level in their lives, because that gives you empathy and compassion, right? If you've never lived a life where you've been through your shadow, been through your darkness and come through the other side, then you don't really understand in many ways, you know, the levels of suffering and the different situations that go on, whether someone's a drug addict, a sex addict, a gambler, or whatever, right? It's all it's all there for us to accept our humanness. And I truly believe the leaders of the future are, or of the new earth, I should say, are willing just to share their experiences, share their vulnerability, share their journey. And maybe they've had a near-death experience, maybe they suddenly had enlightenment, you know, like something's happened, right? And I would actually I want to mention Russell Brand straight away now, because he's coming into my consciousness, and I see him massively as an emerging divine human leader. I do believe he's in 4D, not 5D. So he's obviously got a huge passion. He does remind me in many ways of Christ, right? The Christ consciousness and the absolute love and compassion for addicts in particular, you know, people who are on any of the OA, AA, NA path, so the Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, you know, Overeating Anonymous, which I was in, by the way. I was in the program when I was 15 because I was bulimic, and I was in it for a year before I was like, this is not going to be the rest of my life, there has to be another way. And that was my truth. But I've understood, you know, I went through the 12 steps myself, and you know, there is no judgment here, because I actually am a huge fan, and I've heard a lot of people talk about him being controlled opposition, for example, and that actually he is part of the establishment. But the stuff that he's bringing to light in such an eloquent, beautiful, non-judgmental way, he's saying it for me. I don't need to say most of it. He's done it, and he's done the research, and he's got the lawyers, and he's got the backup, if you like, right? And, you know, he is really, really passionate about supporting those who are suffering. However, going from the doctrine of, let's just say, the AA program, which I know works for so many people, right? Some would say that it is still, it's not the divine path per se, because it's kind of, how can I talk about this with authority and integrity? It keeps you just hanging on, one day at a time, just hanging on. That's all you can do. And, you know, the focus is very much, you know, I'll never regret a day that I chose to stay sober. I will regret a day where I chose to drink, sort of thing. There's that kind of analogy. And I see people literally using their willpower to stay sober or straight or whatever. And it definitely, I've seen it work for others, and it definitely works for him. The question I have is, what else is possible? Because to me, it's not a model that works for me. But then I have a different background to him, different addiction patterns to him, etc. I would just love to have some time with him to kind of explore the 4 to 5D bridge, because we have to embrace desire. We have to embrace our passion. We have to embrace our sexuality. Sexuality, fertility, creativity are all one and the same. Sexuality, sensuality, and often, especially if there's been like a sex addiction background, it's like, this is bad, desiring is bad, wanting is bad. And it's like, I don't see it that way. And so when I'm working with those who are identifying themselves, self-identifying as divine human leaders, I consider myself a divine human leader. I consider you a divine human leader because of your consciousness and how you're working in this world and what's coming for you, right? But you know, and I know that part of our job is really to go into all those contentious places that normally divides people and actually say, how can we look at this in a way that unifies? That says this exists and this is an answer with limited results. What else is possible? What else is possible? What else is possible? And yeah, like I said, I just think that all of us have our own blind spots. We can't get over it. When you bring beautiful people together, what do we do in our coaching? Clients who are usually very well esteemed, you know, coaches, therapists, they've got their professional status, come to us in utter vulnerability to go, I can't change this shit. I can't see this shit. Will you help me? That takes tremendous courage. I did it, and it's the path I offer for others to go, look, I've succeeded here, I've succeeded here, I've succeeded here, but I just can't seem to overcome or override this bit. And again, as I said before, we're not talking about perfection here, right? We're talking about being loving to ourselves through all conditions. So, yeah, does that answer?
Yes. So my next question is, what are we leading them in? So
the new earth paradigm, baby.
Very like self-aware. What are you leading others in? Are you leading them in the same path as you, or are you leading, because if you look at it on a political scale, that's That's not the way they lead us right now. They're not leading us down the path of self-awareness and evolution. So are we just leaders in that respect? Are we practical leaders?
One of the things that's come about over the last 2 years is those who will just follow instruction, even if they know it's wrong, their heart tells them it's wrong, but they don't want to take responsibility for making another choice. And those who are adamant, literally to the point of it's not worth me living if I don't have my freedom to be sovereign, autonomous beings. And, you know, I think it's so important. Every so often I'm like, why do you trust your government? Why do we believe that these powers that be actually want what's best for us, when all through history it was always about control, right? Think about Caesar. You know, think about the old times when, you know, you had kings and queens of villages, etc., and towns, and it's like there's always been those that were governed and those who govern, right?
Yeah.
Now, a benevolent leader is someone who really does want everyone in their tribe, if you like, to prosper. But we've got some real non-make sense things going on in the world right now. Like, I'm not going to say his name, but, you know, fence is another thing. You know, we open these things, right? But we've got this man who looks 86, but is actually 66, telling us how to be healthy in the future, what the future is of our food supply, etc. And he's also the one advising everyone at the moment about health, right? And he's also the one who is the most controlling element of a world health, you know, conglomerate, right? And yet he's also the one that tells us the world's overpopulated. Just like, doesn't anyone see this? Is it just me? And I think this is one of the things about divine human leaders, is they see through it all, and they're like, why is everyone else going along with this? Like, the moment our 2-year cycle started, I remember posting, "The Emperor has no clothes on." I wrote it so many times. I was like, who is going to see this for what it is? Who, right? And, you know, where am I going with this? So I think it's really helpful to understand that the establishment, whatever the establishment is in any time, is looking to keep things the same or to change things to their benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard a lot about the greater good in the last 2 years. And I'm like, what's the highest good? What's the win-win-win?
Yeah.
The New Earth leaders are saying greater good isn't good enough. We need to be all-inclusive here. And all-inclusive doesn't mean forcing people against their will to do something that even on paper looks dodgy, right? Even on paper looks dodgy. That can't be right. So I heard Stephen Greer say in an interview that the day that humanity accepts that extraterrestrial intelligence exists and we're in communication with it, they'll be able to accept all the other distortions that exist on this planet in terms of what we've been told and what we haven't been told, right? And I think people are very happy to see an ET movie and go, oh wow, it's amazing, I'll go and watch it. But the idea, you say, oh, you know, they're real, like, what? You know, really scared. So I was given a visual, and I think this is one thing I do want to speak to, is who the hell am I to say all this stuff, right? I'm claiming and I'm owning that I am this world's leading authority in elevating multidimensional consciousness in the New Earth elite. Now, who are they? What was this elite business? Let's call them the New Earth leaders, right? In those who are willing to take responsibility, to take action, to stand against the status quo, against the crowd. And when I say against, I mean that not as a fighting, but as a saying, this is not where I belong, right? I'm not playing into that, right? So resisting, persisting, all of that. And my role is to help expand, if you like, the awareness of the relationship between our heart-led soul consciousness, our mind, the 4th dimension, and our physical reality, the 3rd dimension, right? So, like, imagine bringing people together, because this is part of the retreat that I've got in my mind, and activating their soul consciousness, their divine nature, teaching them how to keep their light body active and how to stay in the heart, simplifying it all, taking all the faffy stuff out that is just not necessary, because we get caught in the mind and that's where we get locked, right? And actually spending three days together, and sort of by the third day, the challenge is, okay, we're now going to have a roundtable discussion about healthcare, about, I want to be careful about the words that I use, but really contentious issues, right? So money, capitalism, those things that, apparently are really good for us, that they give you from when you're a baby, but there is a lot to say if you look deeper, that there may be another way. What our healthcare system, what our education system looks like. I wrote all these notes, so let me just find them, because I'm careful about the words I'm saying for a good reason, because I've already learned in the last 2 years what happens when I mouth off, so I'm not mouthing off. Veganism, hunting, climate change, female empowerment, what that actually means. I definitely, I'm always going to talk about maternity care and fertility treatment, daring to go there as well. These are really, for someone who isn't owning their shadow, you start having a conversation and you challenge someone's opinion, especially as a leader, right? Another leader. How are we going to go beyond the divide, the division, the judgment, and actually be curious? And that's what we need from our leaders of the future. I've never thought about that before. I've never seen that perspective before. Where does this take us? What could we offer those who want to live an autonomous path? And what can we offer those who don't want to live an autonomous path? Because it was actually my teacher, Susanna Kennedy, who brought this up 2 weeks ago, and we had our Light Body adventure. And I'm deeply committed to my membership with her, because I'm always growing, right? So just like we have our Rise membership for fearless graduates, we're elevating. Rise is Rosy Glow Intentional Soul Explorers. You don't get in that club unless you've done the groundwork, right? Because it's so important that we have a level of consciousness that we can then deal with the triggers and the challenges that come up, and maintain that frequency. That's what everyone's learned, right? So Susanna was talking about, when we did our co-creation, that actually there's going to be like I called it holistic 3D, but what was going to happen for the masses, some people call them sheeple, right? They're those who will follow whatever the status quo is at the time, whatever's being encouraged to be followed, the fashion of the time, the acceptance of the time, will actually upgrade their reality from a fear-based 3D, right, to a love-based 3D, if that makes sense. So fourth density will be still a physical reality planet. The difference that I would say between a starseed and a soul that hasn't recognized themselves as a starseed yet, so 3 to 4D bridge, is that the souls that are in the third dimension, not really aware of all of this stuff, just living life and kind of experiencing the cause and effect, are, younger souls. They're younger souls, they're not ready to embrace that connection yet. And so they're here to have physical experiences, to learn how to manifest in the physical reality, and their physical reality will change. So instead of it seeming like the world is stacked against the best choices, it will be the other way around. I'll give you the example of, I cannot understand how we have whole food halls, supermarkets, that are basically full of fillers that have no nutritional value, that, you go down the aisle of cleaning products and they're full of toxins. I'm like, surely the expensive one that is the environmental non-toxic one should be the cheap one, and the cleaning products that are really toxic should be behind, a locked door, like, cigarettes and tobacco and all the rest of it. And it just needs to flip around. Like, why have we got aisle and aisle and aisle of colorings, sugars, processed foods, and then we're going, oh, but we've got a healthcare crisis. Like, this is bonkers. It's bonkers. The laws that come in place presently are to take more and more of our rights away, because we need protecting. And yet, look what's allowed to exist in our reality that is not protecting us.
Yeah, I like what you said about that it's almost like they're just trying to repeat the same thing over and over again, because there's got these set parameters, no other perspective can be allowed. It's like it has to be this way. We have to just keep doing the things that have proven to work in the past by mass compliance.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about this before, and we might get the screenshot of the piece of paper finally. This is like a book.
Eventually.
You've got your superconscious, you've got your subconscious, and you've got your current consciousness, right? So when we defer to the brain, to the mind, to seek solution without having brought in our higher consciousness and activated our imagination, we can only ever create from history. So if you create from what's happened in the past, you're only going to create something similar in the future, right?
Yeah.
Your imagination is required to do what I call the springboard. What's the opposite of this? How could we seed something else? How can we actually support humanity to be more intelligent, more emotionally intelligent, more connected to their bodies, more connected to their emotions? Now, I bang on about this, but you shared a post that I shared on my page as well about the first 1,000 days, right? And how important they are. Now, we've got 70, 80 years worth of research now that tells us, and in fact, you don't even have to rely on the research. We know that if a dog or an animal is scared, something traumatic happens in their early life, they're buggered for life, right? They have a nervousness, unless it's supported out of them very quickly, they're stuck with it for their whole life. Why don't we understand humans go through the same thing? Just because a baby leaves the hospital or that's the typical environment, the labour ward, crying and eating and doing the apparent things that babies do, and the mother is not bleeding and she's okay, we kind of go, oh, they're fine, they're signed off, they're all right. But we don't actually understand what happened in that labour. Were there scare points? Was the baby pulled out? Is the baby in physical pain, never mind the shock of being born? I'm horrified to say this, but when I was on the Maternity Services Liaison Committee, which I sat as a user rep for 8 years, I co-chaired for a year and then I chaired for a year at Croydon University Hospital, I remember taking some research about pre-autistic tendencies that were visible in newborns that had a traumatic birth, so an assisted birth of some description. And I remember taking this to them and saying, are you aware of this research? And they were like, yeah, we are, we just don't have a budget for it. I'm like, where is our tax money going if you don't have a budget for not, sorry for swearing, fucking someone up? And I'm not saying autism is a fuck up, by the way, at all. I'm just saying the trauma that isn't dealt with early. How can we not have a budget for this, being that these are the generations that are then going to be paying the pensions, of us as we get older, right? They're going to be contributing to it.
I feel like saying that there's no budget is not really a substantial response, because this is just my perspective, it's that we don't know what the solution is, so we need money to find out the solution. It's like, no, you can tap in here.
And we do know what the solution is, actually. We know what the need is that needs to be met. The solution is that we need to really support the mothers from even before they get pregnant, and that includes supporting the fathers. A mother's job spec is insane and she's unpaid, right? It's bonkers. And it's the same for dads, right? I just want to say that the divine human leaders of the future will really value supporting those who are bringing children to this earth, right? There are some countries already doing amazing work with supporting the first 3 years. But back to this point about these first 1,000 days, we know how important they are. We've got all the research, and we have a cross-party manifesto in the UK. All the parties have pledged to this 1,001 days. This was years ago, like 10 years ago minimum. Can't remember the date specifically. What are we doing with it?
Yeah.
What are we doing with it?
It's too slow. It's too slow.
It's not only that, it's cognitive dissonance, because, the political leaders currently, you've got to look at the First and the Second World War. You have to understand the impact of when these people were born, and whether they were born before the First World War, most likely not these days, during the First World War, between the First and the Second World War, or the Second World War, and afterwards. And, I've seen the different addictions, the sort of buying, sugar addiction, then the emotional eating disorders, drugs, whatever they are, because again, everything's banded together. Drugs are bad. What is a drug? Let's just have a look at this. What do you pill pop every day? Oh, a drug, you know, like, hello.
Okay, right, and then other drugs not.
And what else? Then leading to self-harm. Like self-harm has been a huge thing. Like these are all different ways of trying to deal with unprocessed pain, whether it's our own direct pain or passed on from previous generations. So the point I'm making is that these people, they might read it and go, yes, that's a good idea. Yes, that makes sense. But they're so traumatized themselves. They're closer to the trauma. They can't actually work with it. You know, I give the example of my uncle and my family. So I know, like, what's been the story that's been told to me is that my great grandfather was beheaded, right, when my great grandmother was pregnant, and she was pregnant with my grandmother. Now, my great grandfather, they were Greeks. They lived in a southern part of Turkey called Izmirna, and that was a Greek colony. But then the Turks wanted it back, and there was a big invasion. And what ended up happening was my grandmother got on an escape boat, so we were refugees. And then my great grandfather went back to his workplace, the bank. Tells you about the issues with money I've had in the past, right? And my family has with money. And there he was killed. Whether he was beheaded, whether he was stabbed, whatever, the story I had and I was told was that he was beheaded. So that's in my sort of consciousness.
Yeah.
If you actually speak to my family members about it, they kind of laugh it off. They go, oh, well, we don't know whether he was beheaded, or he's also said to have gone off on a white horse to escape Nina, because Nina was a nightmare. That was my great grandmother, right? And I can never have a conversation with that generation, which is my mum's generation, without them cracking some kind of joke, diffusing it, going the other way. They can't actually deal with it. And I feel like this is so important for us to understand when we feel like we've come from parents that have not met our emotional needs and been narcissistic or, you know, sociopathic, psychopathic, whatever, however it's worked out, that we feel abused by our parents. We have to understand that they can only process what they can process according to the tools the previous generation had. So there's been a lot of stuffing down. And that brings us back to the divine human leaders and actually how we live our lives by example, aware that we are processing previous generational stuff as well as soul consciousness stuff. And this is a constant thing, right? We're always relating to the world around us. So we come in, we have to remember our tools, we have to remember our legacy, we have to remember how powerful we are. And the difference between a divine human leader who's soul-led and a leader who is programmed self, ego-led, is that the true divine human leader, as I understand it from my galactic consciousness, will always surrender to the highest good of all and the win-win-win. This is where we've stayed separate from source. In the fourth dimension, there's a lot of people awakening now, having spiritual experiences, playing with manifesting and co-creating and all of that. But there's so much unwillingness to do that surrender bit, that last bit that's like, this is the best I've come up with. This is what I believe will be the best for everyone, or we believe will be the best for everyone. We surrender this to the highest good of all and the win-win-win. Now, how the frig that's going to look in a political system, who knows, right? But it is the willingness to allow things to adapt. And let's just get these words right. The willingness to not get caught up in it has to be done my way, right?
Yeah.
My way being solar plexus. Thy way is the heart, and thy is not external. It is the highest self principle we embody.
Yeah.
So divine human leaders, there are 6 pillars, like what I've been shown on my journey. So as you know, like it was only a few weeks ago I discovered Rosy Glow was a galaxy. That took a little bit of time to integrate. It's like, oh, I'm a galaxy, okay. And then learning more about my star families. So I don't, you know me, I'm a day-to-day human being, right? I'm as out there as, but also what would you say about me? Be careful.
You're also a normal human who experiences all the human emotions.
I am. You know, yesterday I felt wobbly. Yesterday I felt really odd, and I know others did too. I do all the normal functions that other human beings do. I face fear every day, false evidence appearing real. The difference in where I am in myself today and where I was years ago is that most of the time the vibration is up here rather than down here. You know, the amount of work I need to do to get into that space of being my higher self co-creator is much less than it used to be. Do I still find myself, you know, going through resistance and challenging limiting beliefs when I dare to dream a bigger dream? Yes. And you've seen me go through that a lot. But we have to have, if we are going to create a new earth paradigm, which I call Paradise Earth, where we restore our capacity to thrive rather than survive, then we need to know that to be heart-led means we are autonomous, and therefore we access our inner authority. We look to our inner authority. We still need others that we can really trust to hold us accountable. And as we are creating the conditions now for this new earth approach, what I was given was 6 steps, you know, 6 steps to liberation from limitation, which is the mind, and there's a whole course on that. And then we've got Co-Creation 101, which is 6 steps to co-creating your reality in alignment with your soul, which is basically the fearless journey, or when I work with people one-to-one, especially the creatives in the entertainment industry and the leaders wherever they show up, right? That's the process that has to be looked at first, and then we go to the other 2 places, which is the 6 liberation steps and the 6 pillars of divine human leadership. I didn't just come up with these, they came to me, right? It's like I get the downloads usually in my dream state. It will either come in a dream or I'll wake up in the middle of the night and all the information's coming through, and that's how I work with it. So integrity, accountability, transparency, compassion, forgiveness, and discernment are the 6 pillars. Now you could anchor each of those 6 pillars and say, well, what are the offshoots of these 6 pillars, right? Because there are all sorts of other qualities that are essential, but those are the 6 pillars that create the 6-pointed star that is your light body, that becomes the diamond shape when you've integrated your inner masculine and feminine. As a divine human leader, you can't be wounded masculine, wounded feminine. Like that can't be the bit that's leading you. You have to have been able to have witnessed those wounds, made peace with them, like forgiven whatever you're showing up as, and making another choice to show up in another way. So those 6 pillars allow us to have the structure and the scaffolding, if you like, to keep growing into the next level and to not lose our way, because you and I both know that our ego programming, our conditioned programming, will always try and find a way to take you back, right? Yeah. Even if you clear it, even if you've, you know, shifted the cellular memory, the receptor cell memory, it's the familiar is there. And I want to give you an example about this. Remember, I recently talked about the fact that I'd had a birth memory that because I needed help being born, I didn't feel I deserved to live. And therefore, my kind of punishment was that everything had to be difficult for me. That was kind of a baby memory that came up that I connected to, which I needed to move past where I'm now. Now, that is an old memory. That was a subconscious memory. It was yesterday that the current consciousness memory that relates to that, so my current perception and expectation that relates to that old memory that only really came out a few weeks ago, was expecting to struggle, expecting to have a fight, expecting to fight. I did that video about fighting, but I had no, you know, it came through, do this video, then afterwards I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, that's where I'm expecting a fight. So that's the current consciousness and the subconscious, right? These bits can't be saying I'm expecting a fight and life has to be hard if I'm going to follow my divine human consciousness, which says, I am here to create the new earth paradigm. This is something that is, you know, longed for, awaited for, etc. Right? So if these other bits aren't working with that higher order, if you like, they're going to battle and battle and battle to try and take charge again, because that's what they know.
Yeah. So when you say, when we were speaking about how they're going to emerge and how you need to become aware of all of these things, you need to be so aware that you're constantly, like you did yesterday, become aware of when you said something and then went, whoa, where did that come from? Like, and then you're going to go in deep and do the work and untangle where you're coming from, so you can identify, am I in my soul, or am I having ego programming pop up?
Do you know what? Yes and no. I think this is something that came through last night, so I'm so glad you triggered this memory. Let's just make a quick little distinction, 3D, 4D, 5D. So your 3D human is basically relying on your 5 senses for information about what the world around us is, and therefore we respond and we react to that, right? Is it safe, isn't it? Your 4D human has kind of accepted that they've been conditioned to some degree, or that the way they were conditioned isn't the only way to see the world, whether it's culturally, religiously, through the families, beliefs, etc., right? So they start exploring. Now that exploring could be a different religion, it could be a different spiritual practice, it could be psychedelic drugs, it could be anything that opens you up to beyond what you knew. Mm-hmm. But then we enter into this infinite playing field, if you like, or playground of the mind. And so many spiritual teachers and spiritual beings who are awakening are here thinking they're in 5D. And it's like, that's the clue, thinking you're in 5D. If you think you're in 5D, you're not in 5D, right? It's a paradox, because if 5D is actually just frequency and you trusting life loves you, has your back, everything is happening for you. So when something comes along that doesn't look or smell too good, it's like, oh, this is something for me to work with. Mm-hmm. So here's the main distinction. When I see people in the 4D world, they're like, they've got all these different tools and all these different things they do. And, you know, they're looking to try and shift their experience in the reality, but they're doing it mainly with their conscious mind. And what I see with that, and I think tapping is a great example of this, and I love tapping, by the way, please don't anyone think that I don't. These are all tools, it's how they're used, right? So EFT, tapping, whatever, you'll go and you'll do one round, and then it'll take you to another bit, and then it'll take you to another bit, and then it'll take you to another bit, and then it'll take you to another bit. And like, you could just follow yourself down the rabbit hole, right? Because there's an infinite space to clear if you're looking for things to clear, right? It's the work is never done, is what I'm saying. There'll always be another thing to overcome. But when you reverse engineer, you put your soul in control first, and you seek to align with the divine, the you that already has what you want and is in the feeling vibration that you desire. Then when you set that intention and get into the feeling state and activate it, that's when you know the things that are in resistance specifically to where you want to go are going to show up.
Yeah.
That's the difference, right?
Yeah, you're almost ready for it. You're embracing it, going, come on then, show me.
Yeah, you accept that there'll be some subconscious backlash to your superconscious intentions, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing with change. We're not taught to embrace change. We're not taught to befriend change. We want to keep things the same all the time from our old world, right?
Yeah.
So to summarize on that point, I think it's important that we can either endlessly chase our tail thinking we're moving forward, or we can actually be still for a moment and from our current state question, where do I want to go next? What is my vision for the future? What would I like humanity to evolve to? And be inspired. So it's not the should, it's what most inspires me. It's so important, right? And again, to bring it to divine human leadership, we need enough souls that are willing to embrace the journey, to say, this is where I've come to so far, and I'm really well accomplished here and here, but oh my goodness, I'd never thought about my conception, pregnancy, birth, early influences and how they might shape me. That is really important for me to do now. And also, I understand that the more I evolve, the more clever my programming is going to look at trying to disguise its intention, my old programming, to take me back where it's familiar.
Yeah.
And so I need to have others who have a similar code of conduct to me, that understand how to see things multidimensionally, to support me to move through my blind spots very quickly. Because whatever level we vibrate at, whatever our vibrational frequency, if you're an actor, if you're a singer, if you're a well-known influencer, you know, if you're a visionary, a luminary, a political leader, like any type of being who is publicly witnessed, right, is a vibrational frequency. And others will entrain to that frequency, right? That's why there has to come a point where, as a self-elected divine human leader, because it will come from within, that you're willing to step forward and say, I'm willing to dream my biggest dream. I'm willing to go for gold and potentially fail, whatever that means, right? This is how Star Peace came about for me, right? It was like, this is my biggest dream. Let's just shift the whole entertainment industry. I've got to be prepared to face ridicule, people not believing me, people thinking whatever, it doesn't matter. This is still me not playing small, right? So when you decide to do that, you have a responsibility. This is part of your integrity, as I see it, to be the most evolved vibration you can be at the time. Doesn't mean perfection, because perfect is not in the vocabulary of a divine human leader, right? It's like constantly evolving whatever we are. But we are able to say, all right, now my duty, if you like, as someone who is leading others, is to live by example. And that's the example of being compassionate, discerning, forgiving, in integrity, transparent, and accountable. I think that's the last one. So does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just going to bring up, because Marie, who's watching, she's asked, she's curious why you're talking about spiritual hierarchies. I think this was about 20 minutes ago. Is that real?
Spiritual hierarchies? What do we mean by that?
I think it was when you mentioned about, was it Ascended Masters? If Marie's still on here, she could probably write it. Yeah, about being Ascended Masters in training. And this ties into one of the questions that I had, because I've been toying with this idea. If you genuinely believe that everyone is sovereign and is able to self-govern themselves, then where's the leadership required? What does leadership look like if you believe everyone's sovereign?
It goes back to what I said earlier about those who are ready to claim their sovereignty and those who haven't yet actually at this stage of our evolution as souls, right? You know, there is a difference. The purpose of this planet has shifted over time, right? And why souls come here and what they experience. But it was always to have a physical experience and understand the lessons that come with free will. So I'll talk to what I understand about spiritual hierarchy. And I think there's a really, really good book that explains this beautifully, which is Journey of Souls. And I can't remember, it's the Journey of Souls, I think that's what it's called. Maybe you can have a look at it and we can put a link up afterwards. But essentially, the way I see it is it's a bit like champagne glasses. You know those lovely champagne displays where you have the layers of champagne glasses going down? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You pour the champagne at the top and then it filters down, right? Well, think of a toroidal flow. We're all the ocean of source. We separate out initially, you know, split into 12 chohans, I think it's called, the way it was described. And then there's all these subsidiaries, if you like, of different frequencies that kind of divide. And the moment we separate from source and seek to know ourselves as what are we like, take me back, right? So this whole journey of how do we reintegrate into that wholeness and oneness, knowing we are a part of that. So knowing now we are a droplet in the ocean. There is always going to be those who are spiritually advanced of us and those who we are part of their advancement. And I think this is where we have to get away from good, bad, all the rest of it, and just accept we are where we are, right? I'm 43 years old. I don't know how old you are, but I'm always going to be that many years older than you in this lifetime, right? It's not going to change. So just using age as experience, you know, if we want to call it hierarchical, we can, but then we recognize as part of our evolution that there are these amazing young souls coming in now. They know exactly who they are, right? They know where they come from. They know why they're here. And an evolved elder will go, right, let's nurture that. Not, this doesn't fit my narrative, let's shut you down.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. You so actually that's another thing to bear in mind with leadership, is that you have that understanding that they've come here to have a certain experience. And it's not to push them into the experience that everyone should have, it's to nurture individual. Yeah.
I think I'm daring to touch on homelessness, and you know, for me, if there's one thing I would really love to, one of the things I'd love to see shift in this world, it is homelessness, right? There's so many people, especially, you know, in Brighton we see it, in London we see it. Put on my camera, come back. And, you know, if you like, I could have a lofty intention to eradicate all homelessness. There shouldn't be homelessness. There is, you know, as an evolved society, we shouldn't have homelessness. And that can be an idea that motivates me and inspires me, because I can't bear the suffering on the streets as I perceive it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're not suffering, right? I can't imagine anyone is truly electing to be on the street. Maybe I've spoken to some homeless people and they've been like, oh, I don't want to live anywhere. I don't want to live in a house. I don't want to. That's where they're at, and that's what they're about, and that's okay. But there's so many people that are there not largely because they don't want to be, right? But they haven't got another option. I know others who are very, very sensitive to animal welfare and animal suffering, and want to take every stray dog and cat off the streets, right? And just, like, you know, support. And again, it's aiming towards something. But if someone says to you, fuck you, I don't want to live in a home, I don't want to live in a compound, I don't want to this, I don't want to that, I just want to move as I move, what do you say to that? You know, it's like, I am not coming forward here saying I've got the answers. I'm saying that between us, those who activate, those who are willing to look at this from as many different perspectives as possible and say, okay, what is the immediate need? What is the symptom we need to address now? And then what is the root cause of this symptom, which is just what we do in Fearless as well. You've got your symptomatic tools to deal with instant relief, and then the reprogramming tools, right? So we're looking at that is so important. What is the immediate need? You know, if there's a war going on, you've got to evacuate everybody out before you look at what the root of that war is, right? You've got to get people to safety. Anything that is going on requires us to respond, and also to look at how we can make different choices that will allow the future not to have that in it if we don't want it in it, right? And we all have to get comfortable with pain. We all have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We all have to get comfortable with the fact that we're going to die one day, our physical reality. And next week, I am going to have Lara back on to talk about death and dying and being at peace with that, right? But things we don't want to face, that we spend our lives trying to avoid, distract ourselves from, put the radio on so I don't have to think, give me something to read, you know, all of that. It's like, what am I scared of? What is it? And can we start actually addressing that? You know, by the time I get to taking my last breath, I want to be so excited about dying, right? I want to be like, yeah, my body's had enough, right?
Oh yeah, and also I've had all the experiences that I could ever dream of. So
yeah, in this physical reality, and I'm ready for the next adventure, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So I think there's a deeper level here about divine human leadership, which is a subtle shift in how we perceive humanity. Do we trust humanity to be able, by and large, to self-govern with the level of support, or do we believe that humanity is essentially children that need managing, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, need controlling, need managing, and
which is how we're made to feel, I think, a lot of the time, that we're
Well, I referring back to that person, I don't want to call them a human, and I'm sorry to say that, but you know, that is how I feel about it, because I'm just seeing absurdity right in front of me, and he's not the only one. There are so many others, right? But you know, I heard him speaking about his plan for the future, and the way he was speaking and spelling it out was like he was talking to 3-year-olds. I'm like, excuse me, who are you?
Yeah.
And how dare you tell me how things are going to be? Right?
Yeah.
No, I don't comply.
it goes back to then feeding what you expect your life to be, because it's what you're told it's going to be by the powers that be.
Yeah. You know, some of us talk about the powers that should not be, right? Some of us call them the deletes. I mean, I've heard some really great terms, but you know, let's just call it the old boys club. The old boys club is a patriarchal club that's been in existence for several thousands of years. It's very distorted in its viewpoint. It's not the mature masculine or the divine masculine leading. It's not. You know, when I talk about the divine masculine, I mean the mature masculine, right? The evolved masculine, the masculine that owns shadow, so he doesn't project it. That's essentially what it means. But you know, this old boys club has been, you know, running the show for a long time, and dare you go against it? It's insane. I mean, even I could go on so many tangents, but just the fact that so many women were burnt as witches, you know. And I was talking to a friend yesterday, and it was literally, the situation was, if you didn't name another woman, you were going to be burnt, right? That's how it went. So it was literally, I saved myself by condemning another. That was the only way. And there've been some vocalizations of that in the last couple of years, to do the right thing, tell on your neighbors, all that kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
very reminiscent of you know, a couple of wars, right? What's going on there, right? But dare you say that? It's nothing like that, says so and so and so. Really? Okay, let's just take the emotion out of this and look at some of the facts, right? And let's then go, is it or isn't it, right? So when you, sorry, where did you actually go with that? You were talking about, oh, what's my tangent?
Talking to us like we're children, and like, and the also giving us that expectation of how things are going to be.
Yeah. So when we actually do pull this together and say we can do things differently, what would it actually look like? You know, there are many beings that don't want change at all, right? And it's like, I just want things to be the way they were. Well, things change all the time. What are you talking about? When? You know, when in this sort of, because so many things have happened, including mobile phones and Wi-Fi and things we didn't have, you know, 30 years ago, right? So we are constantly shifting. I think embracing change is essential, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, learning from our school age, from even preschool age, how to process emotion and how to allow what is there to be there. There's so many levels. I mean, when I think about it, I get really excited about what the future holds. But you mentioned this earlier, and this is what I want to touch on, is we don't have the solution, right? Because we have to co-create the solution. And the solution isn't a one thing, it is dynamic, like peace is dynamic. So what is the solution in this situation right now, with a view to what we would like to get to in the future? And how can we create a vision that is transparent for the world to decide whether it wants to sign up to or not? I mean, I keep getting this vision of open source politics, really, open source governance, in the sense that, you know, at the moment, if you want something not to be the way the government proposes it, you've got to protest, even though they tried to make protesting illegal. You've got to sign petitions. You've got to make a lot of noise to be heard, right? And when so much is pushed through without, under the radar, it's not even open for discussion, it's just happening. That's really concerning. It's also very concerning when you get to see in Parliament in England, I've seen video of it, and you see all these grown-ups going, here, boo. I'm like, this is really embarrassing.
Isn't proper communication.
These are people that are running, making decisions for our future. Oh my God. Okay, and then I'm like, well, they're doing the best they can. They've been trained to do things a certain way, right?
Exactly. They're just running the script that's been taught to them.
Yes.
Not rather than thinking for themselves. Okay, so let's define down, because probably going to have to finish. What would you perceive the challenges that divine human leaders would face as divine human leaders? You've already touched on one, that we wouldn't always know the solution, and it would have to be, I think we just brought that out. There's going to have to be open communication.
Yeah. I think the challenges of the New Earth leaders really is, more than anything, to cooperate and communicate. you know, to practice the principles that we would like to see infused into our society, into a compassionate, nurturing, oxytocin-fueled society. That we have to have some overarching intentions, right? So shifting the narrative from Star Wars to Star Peace, you know, that might sound abstract, but then when you bring it down, it's like, okay, so shifting from a fear-based paradigm, perception, to a love-based one, a trust-based one. Then we take it down another level and we look at the stress hormones versus the love hormones. So we're able to bring it through heart, mind, body, right? In terms of, you know, what it is. That's the reverse engineering. Then it's about communication and cooperation. It's about sharing, listening, active listening, authentic, compassionate verbalization, right? It's also about being able to own truth. Where are we, like, wanting to go and why? Like, for me, and this is the invitation to any of the divine human leaders that are self-electing, because you know it's in you, you have true passion for change. Like, you can't just sit there and shut things down. You know you've got to be a part of it. Like, how did I know entertainment industry was where I had to go? Well, you can't watch television with me. God help you. An advert comes on and I can't help but F and blind and go, what is, you know, like, I just can't bear it. And it took me 43 years to go, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you do something about it? Duh, right? So when it actually comes to how we actually do this moving forward, I think you have to firstly really get clear that you feel called to be a leader, right? No point in doing it because you think you should. It's actually a desire. It's a desire in you, right? It's not wrong to desire to be a leader if that is your blueprint, right? Forcing it is the problem. So then, in so doing, I think it's essential that, you know, what I would love to offer to divine human leaders is the 666, which turns the number of the beast on its head. But it's not even the number of the beast. On this page, we posted about Friday the 13th and how, again, patriarchal times shaped the beliefs around Friday the 13th, which is a complete distortion of what it was really about back in the day, right? We know we've had this with witches and everything that was said about them that wasn't true as well. So now we're looking at this and we're saying, all right, so where are we going to go with this? Like, how are we going to stay in integrity, in transparency, in accountability? Because that's really what we need to do. And allow ourselves, I'm just trying to think where the segue was and what I was saying there. So from that patriarchal Friday the 13th, there was something else I was going to post about, and I think I forgot what it is now. Brain. But it's inviting all of us to say, okay, I need some parameters to actually be able to feel safe within, to charter uncharted territory, to pioneer uncharted territory. When I don't know what to do and where to go because my shadow stuff is coming up, how I can come back to my center. So the 666, as I was saying, the number of the beast. God, it's coming back today. You know, here we are with a number that's said to be the devil's number, right? And you only have to go on a search engine and start to explore it to realize it's really distorted how that came about, right? And actually, it's an incredibly powerful number, depending on what you actually look at. 6 plus 6, 12, plus another 6 is 18. That vibrates to 9 because you had the 1 and the 8. That's completion, right? But when I look at the number 6, it's double the 3, right? And if you think of a triangle shape, we think of our light bodies, it's 2 triangles that then come together and become like a diamond shape in a pack of cards. So for me, the 6 pillars, the 6 co-creation steps, the 6 liberation steps are like a roadmap for divine human leaders to be able to keep in check, learn how to keep creating that new path, embrace struggle when it comes up and challenge when it comes up, stay out of the head, be led by the heart, but get the mind or the programming, the brain power we have to be able to work on behalf of the heart rather than against it. And then when you have round table discussions and you're like, okay, here's the evidence, here's the research, here's the this, here's the that, you know, we can look at that in the context of what it is we want to achieve in the first place, which is what is being done at the moment, but it's being used against us. And everything that's being used against us, we can use for us.
I like that, getting the mind to work on behalf of the heart. I like that. And you just triggered me in that whole, it's not wrong to be a leader, because I feel that come up in me. I know that there's a desire and there's a passion to lead, but then there's that, you don't, even the question reflects my struggle in that, but if you believe that everyone should be free, why do you want to lead them? There it is. And that I've already acknowledged that, and just need to sit with that and let that play out.
It's paradoxical, and I think, you know, we have to accept paradox as a part of life, right? And you know, there are always going to be days when you wake up and go, I don't want to be a leader today, right? But then there are other days where you just know it's your job, right? And it's like, it's okay. It's just, how can we do it in a way where we don't self-sacrifice? We don't end up being the martyr. We don't end up being the persecutor. Yeah, we move beyond judgment. We practice the principles and we embody them. And therefore, we go back to what we said before about divine humans, leaders, and then you've got starseeds, and then you've got those who don't recognize their starseeds. We all need to coexist, right? So in so doing, you know, my late mum, you know, she was my Reiki master, and I remember her teaching me something, just for today, do not harm. No. It was actually not to do with that. It was to do with her teacher, Soulawakening, who said, don't harm yourself, don't harm each other, don't harm the environment. Those are the principles of living on this earth. But don't is negative, right? So love yourself, love each other, love the environment. That's what when we strip it away, it's got to come down to some basic principles when we lose our way, right? And that's, again, so for those of you who are excited about all of this, remember that what we do through Rosie Glow and through Rosanna Hannis, which is me, is supporting those who are awakening to have secure foundations, to really build their capacity to co-create their reality in alignment with their higher self. We're really adamant about that. Now, Rosanna Hannis, rosannahannis.com, is for those, you know, leaders that are already established, those in the entertainment industry, those who have power and influence and want to use it to the highest capacity to be the most positive influence they can be. You know, I look at some of the sort of people that I'm going to be working with, and I look at the wonderful work they're doing, and I can still see where there's blind spots, where they've kind of just thrown money at something, not really realizing what they're throwing money to, right? And then it's like, well, let's look at that, and let's look at how we could evolve that, for example. And then again, if you are a creative, you know, I'm going to do a post about Leanne Rimes on my Rosanna page soon, because just to explain how her previous codependent nature was really, really showing up in her music, and how we tap into that and think that's love. You know, like, this is the programming we've got to be so careful of. We've got to evolve those who are in the public eye. My intention is to evolve their consciousness from programming to heart-led self, soul-led self, because what will go out in the ethers, if you like, will be a completely different story, right? And for those of you who are like, well, I'm not an entertainment person, and I'm not a leader, and I'm not a this, that's why we have Fearless, and why we have Liberation from Limitation. It's why we offer the deep dive group coaching, which is Fearless, Loved Up and Free to Be Me, and the mind reining in, which is Liberation from Limitation. And both of them are like exclusive, they're different, but they work beautifully together. So most of our team or tribe will do both at some point. It's just which one do you start with and where do you need to start? This is all for us to be sovereign beings. This is training for being sovereign. That's not for everyone, right? At this stage. But if we choose to be sovereign, then we can accept those who are not choosing to be sovereign.
Yeah.
You're not forcing them our way. Saying, you want to be told what to do, you want to do this, you want to do that, okay, here you go, this is the structure for that.
Yeah. And I love what you said earlier about having that understanding that they might not necessarily want to have the experience of being self-governing. They just want to have the experience, and how can you support them in the best way to just have their own experience?
Yeah.
And not stifle that.
Yeah. I think we can bring this to an end just by saying we are absolutely intending the best start in life for everyone, because we know that this will lead to the evolution of the most phenomenal humanity, right? And I didn't talk about money, but I think it is really important.
Yeah.
The leaders of the future really need to be okay with money, with resource, with creating. You know, we need the frequency of the billionaire. And I say that because we consider the most powerful people in this world the people with a lot of money, right? They're the ones who are doing the bidding and making things the way they want. So energetically, we need to be as powerful as them. And I don't want to make people worship money. That's not what this is about, but it's deal with your money stuff, because I see so many spiritually awakened people literally like cutting themselves off from resource. Like everything has to be non-profit, community interest company, you know, this, like what? So what? Unless you've got some superstar funding you, you're fucked, right? No, we want to evolve our capacity to self-generate, regenerate, and grow resource. The planet needs to regenerate. It's not about sustainability, it's regeneration. Aim bigger, right? And then that's when we can start to find our balance. Last thing I'm going to say is I have got a plan for a Divine Human Leadership retreat, a luxury retreat. And by that, I mean it is aimed at those who are really willing to invest in themselves big time, because it will be a significant investment. I've just been like, my whole new structure of what I'm offering in the world has changed. So those who come onto this will be benefiting something that I would do at a much higher price, but still going to be, you know, a significant investment. And it is going to be a 1 month container with a 3-day retreat in it. So at this point, I'm asking you to step forward. If you watch this and you're like, I want that, then get in touch and I'll talk to you about it, because there's literally 4 spaces, right? That's it. And the aim is to be able to really bring together all of these principles of what is required as essential toolkit for a divine human leader in terms of balancing their masculine and their feminine and leading from the heart, and what that actually means. So it's all going to be a part of it, and it'll be the weekend of the September equinox. So that's the plan. So any of you feel the call to explore more, just drop me a DM or drop me a comment and I'll get in touch with you about it. And yeah, we will see where it is lined up, because there are lots of places I could have just stopped and stayed and gone, I'm comfortable here, I'm doing good work in the world, you know, I've got a happy life. And yet the in me that's there, and I know it's in you, Gemma, as well, is like to keep growing, go, well, what else is there? At this point, I feel like I'm totally like true north. This is what I'm doing till I'm an old lady. I'm not going to say till I take my, but till whatever is this is the path now. And I've never felt like that before. So, you know, it took me a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to line up with this and say, I'm going to give it my best shot. And I'm inviting all of you who heed this call to step forward into that energy. What is my biggest dream that I want to offer this world? That's where I'll meet you. Any last thoughts from you, Gemma?
No, I was just going to add that I think it's really important to make people aware that you don't just go, oh, there's my biggest dream, I'm going to do that. It's scary as your dream comes with all the fears, all the, I don't think I can do it.
And most of the time I just want to walk away and go, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
The things that have come up for me in the last week, why do you have to do this? Why, who are you? Like, why are you doing this? Why can't you just be normal?
Who do you think you are?
Yeah. Why can't you just be a normal person that's happy with a normal life? For God's sake, Gemma. Why do this stuff?
I reckon creatives really understand this, because they go through that cycle all of the time, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll just summarize with, everything can relate to a stage of birth, right? To creation, like the conception of something, through to the nurturing it because it's already out in the world. And we're always going through these cycles of creation. So, you know, for some of us, we feel like yesterday I felt like I was in transition, like I kind of wasn't expanding anymore and needing to just bear with it, but I hadn't got the urge to push yet. And I was in this no man's land going, oh my God, what's happening now? Where am I going next? You know? And then you get that urge, and that is where adrenaline works for you. And it's like, we're going here, right?
Yeah. Beautifully described, yeah.
All right. So thank you, our beautiful viewers and listeners, and Starship, Star Peace. The whole Star Peace movement is going to be inviting ambassadors of the Starship, Star Peace to step forward to support this, bringing into the limelight, if you like, the ideas, the intentions that really can change the world. And we mean that from a fear-based to a love-based reality. So thank you for co-creating with us as you hear us talk, and hopefully ideas are pinging. This is really what it's all about. And remember, if you're like, I'm not the divine human leader, book a breakthrough call. If you want to get started on this journey with us, you've got yoga and you've got the new moon co-creations as a basic level entry to our work. That's Monday nights and with the new moons. Otherwise, we've got some digital products in the store that you can try out and play around with. But, we know we're badass at coaching. That's what we do. We're really, really good at this, like from a multidimensional level. And whether, you're someone who is on the 3 to 4D bridge or the 4 to 5D bridge, we've got something for you, right? Just don't be shy to step forward and say what it is you want, and then we'll be honest with you about what we have to offer. If something's a match, and if it isn't, it isn't. But the breakthrough call in itself is going to show you exactly where you are not in alignment with what you want. And by the way, if that then makes you feel a bit offended and a bit vulnerable and a bit then this is what you asked for. You wanted a breakthrough. The breakthrough doesn't come just from someone going, you're doing a great job, off you go. It comes from, here we go, let's look at what we need to line up. And that's going to feel uncomfortable, but embrace discomfort, because everything you want is outside of that comfort zone of yours. And we are masters at stretching comfort zones and then helping you push through to the other side. That you need both, right? That's what we do. So we're owning it. This lady's just graduated from Fearless, so you can always ask her about that as well. Okay, lots of love. See you next week with Lara, and we'll be discussing death. If you like this video and you want to share it, please do. If you're a divine human leader, get in touch. All of you, you know what to do. We love you.
Boom.